Hi everyone, welcome back to the Art of Safe Scumming. Thank you for tuning in. I have had a little bit of time to play around with the proving grounds for the Siege rework, and I highly suggest that you go over and try that thing out and provide some feedback to Creative Assembly for the rework of the Sieges, because I think they've got some things here that are headed in the right direction and some things that might need to be thought about when it comes to their Siege rework. And I will also say that the Proving Grounds is not meant to be a representation of a live build, just throwing it out there. They've just changed some stuff around. I know that a lot of people are upset about some of the things that are in there. And guys, gals, it's just, they've just changed some things to make it accessible so that you can go try it out and see what you think about it. It's not meant to be a live build. But anyway, I've got several things that I would like to respond to in video form, and I want to know what you guys think about those thoughts in the comment section down below. I'm going to start with the most impactful, the thing that I think is going to change campaigns the most of all of these changes, and that is Siege Attacker status from Legendary Lords. I'm okay with some Legendary Lords losing Siege Attacker status. I'm also okay with some Legendary Lords never regaining Siege Attacker status. Now, I understand that we're talking about a fantasy setting here, but I'll explain it like this. Karl Franz on turn 1, a Foot Lord who doesn't have his Rune Fang yet or anything like that. He's just a military commander, a man on foot. Should that human be able to walk up to a gate and bash it down? I don't think that that should be the way that that works. Regardless of it being a fantasy setting, it does not work within the rules of the fantasy universe that is Warhammer. Karl Franz starting off with Siege Attacker as a Foot Lord does not make sense to me. However, as Karl Franz trains up and he eventually gets access to Deathclaw, which is supposed to be the biggest, baddest griffin to have ever lived, then yes, he should obtain Siege Attacker status. Kind of like what the Skaven do with their chieftains. Do not start with Siege Attacker status. But with the Bonebreaker, they gain access to Siege Attacker. So it's whenever the mount becomes available, when they become monstrous or capable of a physical prowess that is capable of knocking a gate down, then yes, at that point in time, gaining Siege Attacker. Characters like Skarbrand, Nakari, Kugath Plaguefather, Kairos Fate Weaver, those characters are monstrous by default, and those characters should start with Siege Attacker status innately. I mean, Skarbrand is supposed to be a massive engine of destruction, and when you talk about demons and the lore for Warhammer, demons, while they may be sometimes incorporeal, when they manifest in the physical realm, they are able to touch physical things. So when it comes to demons in Warhammer, an exalted bloodthirster of Khorne should be able to knock down a gate. There are other lords, for instance, like Sigvald the Magnificent, who does not have a mount or anything that would make him monstrous, lead us to believe that he would be able to physically knock down a gate by himself. Him never gaining Siege Attacker, I'm okay with. It really depends on how that balance is implemented. Because as far as the pacing of any campaign, your first army with your Legendary Lord that you start the campaign with, the momentum has to be there. That first army needs to be able to lay siege. And therefore, there has to be Siege Attacker in that army, or else the pacing of the campaign is going to be all whacked up. So that first army has to have Siege Attacker in it. That can be from the Legendary Lord, or it can be from something in that army that grants Siege Attacker status, a piece of artillery or something like that. But that first one needs to be that way. Your second army, not so much. So what I would say, as far as that implemented in the Siege rework, they should not do that at this time. I think the easiest thing for them to do right now is concentrate on the other changes to the Siege rework leave that alone as is, and then in a future patch, go back and say, all right, we're taking Siege Attacker from these Legendary Lords and not these ones. These ones can gain it through their mount, these ones can't, and then that allows them the opportunity to retool all of those armies so that all of the starting armies do have Siege Attacker, whether that's a Mammoth for Wolfric, whether that is some kind of artillery or whatever it is. That needs to be brought into balance, and that is going to take at least a little bit of time to go back through and evaluate what needs retooled and what doesn't. So I don't think that they should do that at this time. I would leave it alone for the time being and implement the other changes first. Which brings me up to the concept of the buildable ladders and the siege engines and things like that. I like that they've incorporated the ladders for the purposes of having a cheap thing available to build, so that we still have the ladder action, but they just can't walk up to the walls and gain access to the walls whenever. However, there are certain races and unit types that should absolutely be able to do that. Call it wall scaler ability or something like that. There are factions that should be able to do that. It's in the lore. For instance, the Skaven can climb walls. Almost every single text that we have on the Skaven, they can climb the walls. The Beastmen, for instance, do not use siege engines. They kind of do this thing where they kind of like run up to the walls and like die in large quantities and then use the corpses of their brethren to gain access to handholds that are farther up. That's beside the point. The siege engines are there to balance everything when it comes to the actual gameplay, but Beastmen do not use siege engines. They do not use siege weapons. So they can climb the walls. They should be able to climb the walls. Spiders and other units like that should be able to scale the walls without ladders or anything like that. So when it comes to the concept of being able to walk up to the wall and gain access anywhere, it should be slower than it currently is in the live build, but there are units that should be able to, in the lore, climb the walls. Simultaneously, there are unit types in this game that should be able to just go right through the wall. Ethereal units, there's not many of them in the game currently, but ethereal units should be able to walk right through the walls. Think Hex Wraiths, think the Ancestor Heroes from Clan Angrind. All of those units should be able to walk right through the wall without any regard. They are an ethereal unit. They are incorporeal, and they should not be stopped by physical barriers. You could even have something in there that's, think that building that you build that's got like the torch icon or whatever, make that a rune that has been added to the walls for the purposes of stopping the ethereal units. There's a reason to build that now. If you're coming up against ethereal enemies, then you got to build those, or they're going to be able to walk right through your walls. But changing gears a little bit to what should not be able to climb the walls are what I'm going to call stupid units. My vampire counts folks are going to really hate this, but zombies should not be able to climb the walls. They should not be able to use siege equipment. They should basically be able to shuffle. If you read the lore, things like zombies, and skeletons are a little bit different than zombies. The skeletons have a little bit more input from the necromancer that is commanding them. The zombies, though, are kind of like this shuffling mass. And if you read anything that talks about them in combat, they basically act like they are being commanded by a puppeteer that is a couple steps too slow. That's what they command like. The concept of being able to scale up a complex siege tower or something like that, or perform an action like climb up a ladder, is not something that a zombie can do. So a zombie horde should not be able to just use siege equipment. I know that's challenging when it comes to factions that rely on zombies, like Vampire Counts, Vampire Coast, some of the Tomb King stuff as well. You could argue that some of those units would also fall into the dumb unit category. So those should not be able to do that. So thinking about that forward, they should consider that when it comes to their siege changes. Now, I also have some thoughts about defending. I like the concept of now they can't just have access to the walls whenever, unless, of course, we're talking about like Skaven, Beastmen, spider units, things like that. Defending the gates should be a little bit more intensive from both the attacker side, so attacking the gate and defending the gate. I've heard people mention like boiling oil and stuff like that. That was never actually a thing because oil was just far too expensive and period for that sort of thing. But what they did absolutely do is throw big rocks down. So any unit docked on a gate, the reason the gate exists is it is a port through the fortified wall that should be hard to get through, but not as hard as a solid concrete wall. Concrete in quotation marks. A solid stone wall is harder to get through than a gate. However, the gates have lots of defenses. That's why they're designed the way that they are, so that there are arrow slits in the floor, arrow slits in the walls, murder holes, things like that. We had a bug a while back when the Chaos Dwarves first came out, and Chaos Dwarf gates would just spontaneously, like, instant murder a unit. Depending on where you were in the settlement, if the glitch triggered, it would just instantly kill your unit. Or hero, even, sometimes. Like, I had Gortys Backstabber one time, knocking down a gate, and it just killed him instantly. I understand it was a bug, but there should be some kind of functionality that's built into the gate. To get access to it, you have to have units docked on the gate, where you're throwing down rocks or something like that, where infantry that has been docked there, whether they're missile units or not, will be able to do damage on defenders that are in the murder holes. And I don't think that, and again, I'm not a coder or a programmer or anything, but I can't imagine that given the current situation with the way the defenses on the buildings, on the walls, and everything work, that it would be all that difficult to set up some kind of docking option for infantry to do some amount of continuous damage. You could even, in the short term, have it look like, I don't know, a periodic flock of doom or something like that that is occurring to the infantry that is in the actual gatehouse, trying to knock down the gate. Anyway, I'd like to know what you guys think about this in the comment section down below. Thanks for tuning in, and make sure you go check out the Proving Grounds and render some feedback.